terrorists have found safe haven in Canada. Canadian Prime Minister has this way of just coming out with some outrageous allegations without any supporting proof. I'm not surprised that sometime Prime Minister Trudeau comes out with outrageous, unsubstantiated allegations. Yesterday he had gone and given a rousing welcome to somebody who have associated with the Nazis in the past on the Second World War.
You met with Foreign Minister Jaishankar. If you can tell, how was the conversation?
Very good to always to meet my friend Dr. Jaishankar. We just had a small conversation as to how we strengthen the Sri Lankan relationship, and also I have invited him to visit Sri Lanka for the IORA. He promised that he will try his level best to make it and to take the country forward, and the great relationship that we have strengthen that.
Sir, my always question is, there are diplomatic tensions between Canada and India that is ongoing because of Trudeau's allegation, which India has obviously rejected. What will you say on that and on India's response, since we know that Sri Lanka has too suffered from various forms of terrorism in the last decade?
Yeah, we have always suffered, and some of the terrorists have found safe haven in Canada. Canadian Prime Minister has this way of just coming out with some outrageous allegations without any supporting proof. The same thing they did for Sri Lanka, a terrible, total lie about saying that Sri Lanka had a genocide. Everybody knows there was no genocide in our country. And I saw yesterday he had gone and given a rousing welcome to somebody who have associated with the Nazis in the past on the Second World War. So this is questionable, and we have dealt it in the past. We have categorically rejected those outrageous allegations. So I'm not surprised that sometime Prime Minister Trudeau comes out with outrageous, unsubstantiated allegations.
Since you mentioned about his comment on the genocide, we know Canadian High Commissioner in Sri Lanka was summoned. How do you think that statement has affected the relationship between Sri Lanka and Canada, and if you can talk about the wider Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, that has actually affected our relationship. People to people, we have good contact. Foreign Ministry has a different take on that. Ministry of Global Affairs has very clearly said that Sri Lanka did not go through a genocide. Whereas the Prime Minister, as a politician, stand up and says that genocide had taken place. That itself is contradictory to each other. That doesn't help. I don't think anyone should poke their nose into the other countries and tell as to how we should govern our country. We love our country more than anyone else. That's why we are in our country. So therefore, we are not very happy about that that statement at all. So basically, I think that's what is very important. IORA, we are saying that Indian Ocean identity and strengthen the regional architecture. We have to look after our region. We need to work together. That's how we can create a peaceful environment there, and we should not be dictated by anyone else as to how we should conduct our affairs.
So there are reports of Chinese research vessel scheduled to be docked in Sri Lanka in October, named as Xi'an 6. If you can tell us something about that, since we know that India in the past has raised concern because of its security, and how does Sri Lanka assures New Delhi that its security interest in the Indian Ocean will be?
Yeah, that's a conversation going on for some period of time. India has expressed its concerns for a long period of time. But we have now come out with a SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. When we were making that, we consulted many of our friends, including India. So as long as they comply with the SOP, we have no problem. But if it doesn't comply with the SOP, we have a problem. So therefore, as far as I know, we have not given the permission to come to Sri Lanka during the month of October. So there are negotiations going on, but Indian security concerns, which are legitimate, are very, very important for us. We have always told that, because we want to keep our region as a zone of peace.
So another point of concern is the fishermen issue between India and Sri Lanka. We saw during the President's visit this year the discussion between the Prime Minister and the President, our Prime Minister telling the President that you should see this matter with a humane approach. So if you can talk about that, how is this going to resolve?
It has to be human from both sides. Our fishermen also, their livelihood. Therefore, we need to sit and talk about it. I think Sri Lanka and India has a history of sitting and negotiating and resolving problems. It do comes, just like in a family. So we are very confident that if we can sit and talk about it and find a solution which is win-win, which is good for Sri Lanka, good for India, and good for our relationship. So I know tough times. We also have a lot of pressure from our fishermen, particularly from the Tamil-speaking fishermen in north and east, because that's their livelihood. But as similarly, it's also livelihood for the people in some of the fishermen in your country. So I'm sure we will sit, we'll negotiate, we'll discuss this, and find a solution which is acceptable to all.
So what is the current situation in your country right now, since we know that Sri Lanka has dealt with the economic crisis in the last few time, and what will you say on India's assistance?
Yeah. The situation is much better compared to last year. I'm sure as a journalist you would know the inflation has come down, tourism has picked up, rupee has stabilized, reserves have risen. But if you look at carefully, I was telling this morning when I met with some senior officials of the UN, there is when I was advocating to have a financial architecture, we were lucky because by the time all multilaterals coming and giving the money, we had a huge gap, but it is India who played and bridged that gap by coming out with 3.9 billion worth of various form of assistance to us. So we are very grateful. I think India can proudly claim a great part of credit for what we have achieved today.
So last question, in terms of trade relationship, what can we expect between the two countries?
Trade is very important because we are looking at India growing, one of the fastest growing largest economies, big economies, and India is growing, and that growth path is very important. Together with that, the region must grow. So we have seen a big opportunity here. So that's the idea. We are trying to, in electricity, renewable energy, tourism, port, shipping, connectivity. We are looking at forging closer relationship with your country. And I'm sure we will be able to do that, and that will be better for both countries. And we want a good region with prosperity, peace, and harmony among all. So, as I always say, until everyone is safe, no one is safe. It's true for the region. So we want a good neighbor, prosperous neighbor. India is going that path. We want to go with them.